The Philosophy of Redemption, The Global Legacy of Marcus Garvey. Introduction, The Immortal Idea. If the story of Marcus Garvey's life was a testament to the power of a single soul to challenge empires, then the story of his philosophy is a testament to the immortality of an idea. To understand the world we live in today, one must understand that the seeds planted by the Universal Negro Improvement Association, UNIA, in the early 20th century, did not simply wither away when Garvey was deported or when he drew his final breath in a quiet cottage in London in 1940. Instead, those seeds were carried by the winds of change across the Atlantic, deep into the heart of the African continent, and into the emerging consciousness of every liberation movement that followed. Part 2 of this journey is not about the man himself, but about the blueprint he left behind, a blueprint for economic, spiritual, and political sovereignty that continues to resonate in the modern age. It is a story of how a philosophy of race first transformed from a localized movement into a global standard for human dignity. Garvey knew that while a man could be imprisoned, an idea could cross oceans without a passport. He knew that the struggle for freedom was not just a physical battle against chains, but a metaphysical battle for the ownership of one's own identity. He understood that liberation was a multi-stage process. First, the breaking of the physical bond. Second, the purging of the colonized mind. And third, the construction of a self-sustaining world that could stand the test of time and the pressure of opposition. The first pillar, economic self-reliance and the psychology of the dollar. The first pillar of this blueprint was the concept of economic self-reliance. Garvey understood with a startling clarity that political freedom without economic power was a hollow victory. He looked at the global landscape and saw a recurring tragedy. His people were the primary consumers of goods they did not produce, and the primary laborers for industries they did not own. This was a form of commercial slavery that Garvey was determined to dismantle. He believed that if you did not control the bread on your table, you did not control the thoughts in your head. To correct this, he launched the Negro Factories Corporation. This was not merely a business, it was a psychological revolution. Garvey argued that as long as you have to ask another man for a job, you have to ask that same man for your right to exist. In the heart of Harlem, the UNIA began to demonstrate what communal wealth could look like. They opened a chain of grocery stores where the food was fresh, and the profits stayed within the neighborhood. They opened laundries that provided dignified work for women who had previously been relegated to the most grueling domestic labor in the homes of the wealthy. Imagine the scene: rows of workers, their heads held high, working in facilities they co-owned, producing goods for a community that finally saw itself as a market of value rather than a source of exploitation. The Negro Factories Corporation eventually expanded to include a steam laundry, a tailoring and millinery store, and even a publishing house. In these spaces, the communal dollar was being used to build a communal infrastructure. Every cent spent at a UNI-owned restaurant was a brick laid in the foundation of a new nation. This was the birth of a philosophy that taught that the path to respect was paved with the bricks of one's own industry. Garvey was essentially teaching a masterclass in vertical integration. Before the term was common in business schools, he wanted his people to own the farm, the truck that moved the produce, the store that sold it, and the bank that held the profit. He knew that the only way to compete with empires was to build a commercial empire of one's own, a network of trade that was immune to the whims of a hostile society. The global triangular trade of the mind. Garvey's economic vision was audacious because it was global. He didn't just want a small store on a corner. He wanted a triangular trade route that mirrored the historic routes of travel but reversed their intent. He envisioned ships, the famous Black Star Line, carrying raw materials from a free Africa to be processed in factories owned by the diaspora in the Americas, with the finished goods sold back to a global market. Think of the psychological impact of seeing a massive steamship, manned by a black crew, flying a flag of liberation, docking in the harbors of the Caribbean or West Africa. It was a sight that shattered centuries of propaganda about the inability of the African to manage large-scale enterprise. This was a direct challenge to the mercantile systems of Europe. The British, the French, and the Belgians had built their empires on the extraction of African wealth. Garvey's plan was to cut out the middleman entirely. He was teaching a marginalized people to think like a superpower. He understood that when you own the means of production, you own your destiny. This economic radicalism is what truly terrified the authorities of the time. While his speeches were provocative, his balance sheets were dangerous to the status quo. When the FBI and the colonial offices looked at the UNIA, they didn't just see a protest group. They saw a competing economic system that threatened the very foundation of the colonial order. They saw a movement that was teaching the servants of the world how to become the masters of their own commerce. This was the threat of Garveyism. It wasn't just asking for a raise, it was building a new economy where the old masters were irrelevant. It was a vision of a world where the wealth generated by the labor of the many was finally enjoyed by the many, rather than being drained into the coffers of a distant metropolis. The second pillar, spiritual and psychological decolonization. The second pillar was the spiritual and psychological decolonization of the mind. Garvey was a master of iconography. He understood that for centuries, the image of the divine had been used as a tool of subjection. If the imagery of holiness and authority always looked like the oppressor, the oppressed would naturally feel that their subservience was divinely ordained. This was the ultimate form of mental conditioning, a prison for the soul that required no bars. Garvey famously declared that if a man saw his God through the eyes of others, he remained a subject in his own soul. He didn't just criticize existing structures, he built new ones. Through the African Orthodox Church, he encouraged the reimagining of religious imagery. He suggested that if God is a spirit, and man is made in his image, then a black man has every right to see the divine reflected in his own features. He spoke of a black Christ and a black Madonna, not as a way to create a new dogma, but as a way to break an old spell of inferiority. He wanted his followers to walk into a sanctuary and see their own dignity reflected back at them from the stained glass and the icons. This shift in consciousness was the precursor to the Pride movements of the 1960s and the liberation theologies that would later sweep through the Caribbean and South America. He was essentially performing a mass surgery on the collective psyche, removing the colonizer's mirror and replacing it with a vision of ancestral glory. He taught that beauty was not something defined by the fashion magazines of Paris or London, but something inherent in one's own identity. By reclaiming the spirit, he reclaimed the man. He taught that the first step to freedom was the realization that you were never meant to be a slave, and that the Creator did not intend for any race to be the footstool of another. The Negro world, the global connective tissue. Central to this psychological work was the UNIA's official newspaper, The Negro World. At its peak, this publication had a circulation that reached the hundreds of thousands, and it was printed in multiple languages, including French and Spanish. It was more than a newspaper. It was a global connective tissue that tied the disparate parts of the world together into one coherent voice. Imagine the newsrooms in Harlem, the clatter of the typewriters, the smell of fresh ink, and the sense of mission that drove every editor and reporter. In the colonial era, European powers tried to keep various branches of the diaspora isolated from one another. They wanted the worker in Kingston to believe his struggle was unique, and the student in Lagos to believe he was alone. They relied on the ignorance of the masses to maintain their grip on power. Garvey used the press to break those walls. The Negro World was the first truly international black media conglomerate. A worker in the gold mines of South Africa could read about the successes of a business owner in Chicago. A student in London could read about the struggles of a farmer in Kenya. This shared information created a global village long before the internet existed. It provided a common language of resistance. The colonial governments feared the paper so much that they made it a crime to possess it in many parts of the world. In some colonies, you could be imprisoned for years just for having a single page of it in your home. Yet, it was smuggled in by sailors and travelers, read aloud in secret meetings under the cover of night, and passed from hand to hand until the ink faded and the paper crumbled. It was the Underground Railroad of information, carrying the message of freedom into the most remote corners of the world. It turned every reader into a revolutionary and every copy into a manifesto of human rights. The seeds of independence, the Black Star rises. As we move into the middle of the 20th century, we see the political seeds of Garveyism beginning to sprout into the reality of independent nations. Garvey had died in 1940, but his ghost was present at every independence ceremony from the 1950s onward, when Jomo Kenyatta, Kwame Nkrumah, and Nnamdi Azikiwe stood in the squares of their respective capitals and declared their nations free forever. They did so with the philosophy of Marcus Garvey in their hearts. They were the fulfillment of his prophecy that the giant of Africa would one day wake up and shake itself free. Kwame Nkrumah, the first president of Ghana, openly admitted that of all the books he studied while in America and London, including those by Marx and Lenin, the works of Marcus Garvey did more to fire his enthusiasm than any other. This is why the national flag of Ghana features a black star in the center. It is not just a design, it is a direct tribute to Garvey's black star line. The connection is undeniable. When the flag was raised for the first time in Accra, it was a signal to the entire world that the era of Garvey had finally arrived in its political form. From the Mau Mau uprisings in Kenya to the independence movements in the Caribbean, the slogan of Africa for the Africans, at home and abroad, provided the ideological fuel for the dismantling of empires. Garvey had told the world that the provisional president of Africa was a title of the future, and the leaders of the new era were the ones who made that future real. They were the mighty race that Garvey had predicted would one day stand on its own feet and look the world in the eye. They proved that the dream of a united Africa was not just a poet's fantasy, but a political possibility that could reshape the global map. The influence on the American civil rights movement in the United States. The influence of Garveyism was equally profound, though it often operated beneath the surface of the traditional civil rights narrative. While the mainstream movement focused on integration and legal reform, the Garveyite spirit lived on in the concept of self-determination and community control. It was the radical alternative that made the moderate demands seem more palatable to the establishment, providing the muscle behind the diplomacy. The parents of many legendary activists were active members of the UNIA. Malcolm X's father was a Garveyite preacher, and his mother was a reporter for the Negro World. He was raised in a household where the uncompromising stance on dignity and self-reliance was the daily bread. Even Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., whose methods of nonviolence differed from Garvey's more radical approach, acknowledged the debt the movement owed to the man from St. Anne's Bay. King famously remarked that Garvey was the first man on a mass scale to give millions of people a sense of dignity and a sense of somebodyness. Garveyism provided the spine for the movement. It was the internal confidence that allowed people to walk into hostile spaces and demand their rights. You cannot demand a seat at the table until you first believe that you are worthy of the feast. And Garvey was the one who convinced the masses of their worth. He gave a voice to the voiceless and a platform to the marginalized, ensuring that the struggle for equality was always rooted in a deeper struggle for identity. His legacy was the foundation upon which the houses of freedom were built in the 1960s, the modern diaspora and internationalism. The legacy of the UNIA also laid the groundwork for modern international movements. The dream of a united and integrated continent, Pan-Africanism, remains the North Star for global diplomacy. Garvey taught that the global community was one whole, and that no part could be truly powerful without the other. He saw the world not as a collection of isolated islands, but as a vast, interconnected network of people sharing a common origin and a common destiny. This transnational identity is what allows a person in London or New York today to feel a visceral connection to the progress of a tech hub in Lagos or a fashion house in Dakar. Garvey provided the cultural and emotional bridge that allows the diaspora to find its way home, whether physically or intellectually. Today, we see this in the Year of Return initiatives and the increasing collaboration between artists and entrepreneurs across the Atlantic. Garveyism in the 21st century is about the globalization of the soul. It is the understanding that our stories are linked, our economies are intertwined, and our future is collective. He taught us that distance is no barrier to the mind. And in an age of digital connectivity, His words have never been more true. He envisioned a world where the diaspora was not a dispersed people, but a distributed power, a global force capable of influencing the course of human history through unity and shared purpose. Garveyism in the digital age, the new Negro world. But what does Garveyism look like in the 21st century? In the age of social media and decentralized finance, his call for knowledge of past history has found a new medium. The internet has become the modern Negro world, allowing for the rapid exchange of ideas and the continued building of a global community. The speed of light has replaced the speed of the steamship, and the reach of the message has become truly infinite. The rise of cinema, music, and art on the world stage, from Afrobeats to the global dominance of black film, is a fulfillment of Garvey's belief that his people would eventually lead the world in culture and creativity. He understood that culture is a form of soft power. When a song recorded in a small studio in Nigeria becomes a global anthem, it is the mighty race accomplishing what it will. It is the sound of a people reclaiming their narrative and inviting the rest of the world to listen to their rhythm. Furthermore, the modern movement for justice and the reclamation of stolen artifacts is a direct continuation of Garvey's demand for restoration. He was one of the first to articulate that the wealth of the West was built on the exploitation of others, and that a reckoning was inevitable. He didn't just want an apology, he wanted a restoration of status. Today's activists who are working to return the Benin bronzes or to restructure global trade systems are walking the path that Garvey cleared over a century ago. He taught that justice is not something that is given by the grace of the powerful, but something that is demanded by the strength of the organized. It is the realization that the past must be settled before the future can be built. Education, a tree with roots. In the realm of education, Garvey's influence is seen in the push for more inclusive and accurate historical curricula. He knew that as long as history was written by the colonizer, the colonized would remain mentally enslaved. A people without the knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. He warned. He understood that a stolen history leads to a stolen future, and that the classroom was the first battlefield for liberation. The growth of Black Studies and African Studies programs worldwide is a direct response to this warning. We are finally beginning to teach history not as a story of discovery by outsiders, but as a story of internal genius, resilience, and complex civilizations. We are learning about the empires of Mali, the universities of Timbuktu, and the engineering marvels of Great Zimbabwe. This is the knowledge of the past that Garvey insisted was necessary for any future progress. He wanted a generation of children who didn't just know how to read and write, but who knew who they were. He believed that an educated mind was the most difficult thing in the world to enslave, and that truth was the ultimate keys to the gate of freedom. Future challenges and the Garveyite compass. As we look toward the future, the challenges have changed, but the core principles remains the same. The struggle for economic sovereignty is now played out in the world of technology, renewable energy, and digital infrastructure. The struggle for mental liberation is now fought against modern biases, social media algorithms, and the subtle pressures of a globalized culture that seeks to flatten our unique identities. Yet, in every one of these new arenas, the Garveyite spirit of self-reliance provides a reliable compass. He would tell the modern entrepreneur to not just work for a corporation, but to build their own platforms. It shines in the hearts of the dreamers, the doers, and the builders. It shines in the hope of a continent and the strength of a people. Across the globe, it is the beacon that guides us through the storm and the light, that reveals the path to the summit. It is a star that does not lead to a single place, but to a single truth, that we are the masters of our own destiny. Marcus Garvey's life was the spark. His philosophy was the flame, and we are the fire that will light the way for the generations to come. The work continues. The building goes on. The race is still rising. He reminded us that the ends you serve that are selfish will take you no further than yourself, but the ends you serve that are for all, in common, will take you even into eternity. Marcus Garvey has entered into that eternity, not because he was a perfect man, but because he served a purpose that was greater than any man. And as long as there is a single person on this earth who refuses to bow, who refuses to forget their history, and who refuses to give up on their dreams. The spirit of Marcus Mosiah Garvey will live on. We are the children of the stonemason's son. We are the heirs to a legacy of curiosity and courage. We are the builders of a new future. Whether we are on the continent or thousands of miles away, we carry the colors of liberty in our hearts and in our actions. We are the fulfillment of the prophecy, the living testament to the power of a dream. The horizon is wide, the legacy is calling, and the path is clear. Let us build the institutions that will stand for 1,000 years. Let us educate the children who will lead us into the stars. Let us create the art that will tell our story to the ages. Let us be the mighty race that accomplishes everything it wills. The story of Marcus Garvey is our story. The victory of Marcus Garvey is our victory. And the future of Marcus Garvey is the future we are building. Right now, with every word, every deed, and every dream, in every corner of the world, the message is the same. It is a message of power. It is a message of unity. It is a message of love for oneself and one's kind. It is the philosophy of redemption, and it is the most powerful weapon we have ever possessed. Use it, live it, be it, for the sake of the ancestors who suffered, for the sake of the generations yet unborn, and for the sake of the truth that sets us free. We are the generation that will finally bridge the gap between the vision and the reality. As the sun rises on a new day, let the words of the prophet of freedom echo in our ears. Let them be the wind at our backs and the fire in our souls. Let them be the foundation of our strength and the goal of our journey. The world is ours to inherit. The time is ours to command. The destiny is ours to create. There is no force on earth that can stop an idea whose time has come. And the time for the philosophy of redemption is now. Up, you mighty race. The work is not finished. The glory is just beginning. Accomplish what you will, for the sun sets on the man, but it never sets on the mission. The mission is you. The mission is us. The mission is freedom. In the name of Marcus Mosiah Garvey, and in the name of all those who have stood for the dignity of our people, let us move forward with one heart, one mind, and one soul. Let us be the light that ends the long night of subjection. One aim, one destiny. The world is waiting. The time is now. Accomplish what you will, in every act of self-reliance, in every moment of pride, and in every step toward true independence. Marcus Garvey is there. He is in the classroom where a child learns their true history. He is in the boardroom where an entrepreneur builds their empire. He is in the street where a community stands together for justice. He is the silent partner in every success and the loud advocate in every struggle. We look back to Jamaica, to Harlem, to London, and to Africa, and we see the path he cleared for us. It is a path of dignity, a path of strength, and a path of glory. We walk it with our heads held high, knowing that we do not walk alone. We walk with the ancestors. We walk with the giants. And we walk with the prophet of freedom himself. The vision is clear. The mission is set. And the future is ours to command. This is our moment. This is our legacy. This is our destiny. Rise up, you mighty race. The world belongs to those who dare to dream and those who have the courage to build. The black star is rising, and it will never set again. Accomplish what you will,